Hello, everyone. Welcome to the National Agricultural Library's Ag Data Commons monthly webinar series. This month, we're focusing on a theme of data science as it applies to agriculture, and we will highlight the big data analysis projects and work of two of NAL University of Maryland iSchool data science fellows. Shivam and Saith will present the work on USDA dietary guidelines mix analysis. Akshat Pant will present on his work with happen assessment, accessible agrobiodiversity data in GBIF and NAL Thesaurus. I'm sorry, we're getting a little bit of feedback here. We're trying to Hello. If everyone could make sure that their phones are muted for the presentation so we don't get feedback, that would be wonderful. Thank you. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to post them in the public chat. And at the end of both presentations, we will open up for questions through both audio and the online chat. So without further delay, I will turn it over to Shivam.
Hey everyone, my name is Shivam Saith, and I'm a data science fellow here at the National Agricultural Library in the Knowledge Services Division. I recently graduated with a degree in Information Management from the University of Maryland, College Park. My primary interests are working with data to generate insights out of it, to help in decision making, and also generating impactful data visualizations. I'm here to talk about the latest project I accomplished here at NAL, a project titled USDA Dietary Guidelines Sentiment Analysis. In this project, I have done a sentiment analysis of the statements relevant to 6 essential nutrients and generated visualizations to demonstrate the sentiment associated with each nutrient. I have been guided in this project by my supervisor here at NAL, Mrs. Cynthia Parr, along with my supervisor at the University of Maryland, Mr. Adam Kreisberg. So what are these USDA dietary guidelines? In simple words, they include a little over 100 years of nutrition advice for Americans. The first one was published in 1894. They have been about scientific findings and health marketing techniques. And since 1980, they are being released once every 5 years under the name Dietary Guidelines. The dietary guidelines are more detailed and are comprehensive in nature. The motivation behind this project was the fact that the recommendations regarding the different nutrients have changed over the years. For example, in the past, fats have usually been presented in a negative tone, but over the time it has also been mentioned that some types of fats are good for the body, unlike other fats. The goal was to create visualizations to easily convey complex information. Basically, it is about analyzing all the statements dealing with a particular nutrient and not just understanding whether the sentiment is positive or negative, but also calculating the extent to which a statement is positive or negative. The individual statement sentiments have been arranged over time to generate trendline visualizations. The project scope has been limited to dietary guidelines that were released starting 1980 until the latest one that was released in 2015. There are 2 reasons for limiting the scope to this time period. The first one, as I mentioned before, because the dietary guidelines are more detailed in nature as compared to the original nutrition guidelines. And also there was a lot more data to work with and to use it to come up with reasonable conclusions about the sentiment of nutrients. Secondly, the data was much more cleaner, and optimal character recognition could recognize the original data with a much higher accuracy as compared to the data of some of the previous years. Now let's talk a little bit about the corpus. The corpus I had to work with included dietary guidelines from 1980 till 2015, as I mentioned before. I have shared the link in case any one of you is interested to have a look. The corpus consisted of a total of 8 documents, which had 182,000 words in them in total. It is interesting to note that the content in these dietary guidelines has followed the trend where the content increases every year. To put things into perspective, the dietary guidelines in 1980 had around 3,000 words, whereas the latest one in 2015 had 57,000 words. Just wanted to talk in brief about the essential nutrients, which are the focus of this project. Wikipedia defines an essential nutrient as a nutrient that the body cannot synthesize on its own, and it's something that must be provided by the diet. There are 6 of them, including proteins, vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, fat, and water. It is also important to note at this stage that the project concentrates only on the parent level and not the subgroups of nutrients under a particular nutrient. For example, there are multiple types of vitamins like A, B, and C, but the project concentrates on the overall estimate for vitamins and not individual vitamins, and this applies to all other nutrients as well. As far as the process goes, I started by converting the PDF to the textual data. I had to use optimal character recognition for that, and Google Docs did a fairly good job for me by converting the PDF, the image which had textual data, and converting it to full textual data. As far as the data cleaning goes, I had to remove erroneous new line characters, spatial characters that played no part in the sentiment. I also had to develop regular expressions to identify the beginning of a new statement, and this was later used in effectively separating the different statements. Finally, after separating at the individual statement level, I used the relevant package methods to give me the sentiment scores. Just wanted to talk in brief about the technologies I have used to accomplish this project. Python is a very popular language in the data science world and has been used for this project as well. I have personally used both Python and R, and went with Python in this case because I felt it had a variety of packages for data manipulation as well as natural language processing. Jupyter notebooks have been used, which allow us to create and share documents that contain live code, equations, and visualizations. It allows one to code right in the browser and eliminates the need to install any other integrated development environment, and it also makes it very easy to share your code with others. Besides this, I have used Anaconda, which is an open source distribution and helps in simplifying package management and deployment. The 2 main Python packages which have been used for sentiment analysis are TextBlob and Vader Sentiment. Each of these packages is tuned to a specific type of data. Vader is more or less tuned to social media data, and TextBlob is...
Yeah. I'm going to listen to this data on every question. Yeah. Okay.
Could you please mute? Somebody is not muted. Thank you.
So as I was mentioning, each of these packages is tuned to a specific type of data. Vader is more or less tuned to social media, and TextBlob is a beginner level package not tuned to any specific type of data. I have used both of them and provided the end user the option to use either of these packages to carry out the sentiment analysis. One package performs better for some kind of statements and vice versa. For visualizations, there were a couple of options I contemplated, including matplotlib, which is very popular in the Python world, but I ended up using Plotly due to the ease as well as the quality of visualizations it produces with minimal code. It is important to note, although, that only a limited number of visualizations generated are free, and it is not free for commercial use. Just a bit of details about the packages. So these packages have a predefined list of positive, negative, and negation words with scores associated with each word. For instance, TextBlob has polarity, subjectivity, and intensity scores for each word. Polarity ranges from -1 to 1, subjectivity from 0 to 1, and the intensity is from 0.5 to 2. Polarity refers to the extent of positivity or negativity of a word. Subjectivity scores calculate how objective or subjective a particular word is, and intensity is a measure of how a particular word modifies the next word. As an example, the word great has a polarity of 0.8, but when the word not is used behind great, the polarity of the two words together becomes minus 0.4. Whereas the two words very great combined together have an overall polarity and have a perfect score of 1. For calculating the polarity score of a statement, these individual scores for words and phrases are averaged out to calculate the final score. It is important to note here that in the scope of this project, we are concerned only with the polarity scores and not the subjectivity and the intensity scores. This slide shows 3 simple examples of positive, negative, and neutral statements as calculated by the text block package. The statement on the top has a perfect score of 1, primarily because of the presence of the word excellent. The statement in the middle is neutral because it does not have any positive or negative word within it. The third statement is slightly negative in polarity, primarily because of the presence of the word limit. Once the sentiment scores of the nutrient-relevant statements were calculated, 3 different types of visualizations were generated. The polarity value scatter plot, the maximum and minimum polarity trend plot, and the mean polarity time series plot. We'll talk about each of them one by one. As you can see, the polarity value scatter plot gives the individual polarity scores for all the nutrient-relevant statements to give a quick look at how was the sentiment of the different statements related to a particular nutrient in a year. As you can see here, the least sentiment, which is minus 0.6, and the maximum sentiment is 0.45. Thus, even though water has a higher overall negative sentiment, because there are so many positive sentiment statements, the mean sentiment for water for the year 2010 is positive. The mean polarity time series plot also runs across all the years, but it runs across all the years, but has only one. My apologies. You're looking at the max and min polarity trend plot right now, and it runs across all the years, and this type of plot is used to give an idea about the range of positive and negative statements for a nutrient over the years. And in this specific case, we can see that water-related positive sentiments are increasing since 1995. Coming to the mean polarity time series plot, these plots are also running across all the years, as you can see. The only difference is that they have one trend line as compared to 2 trend lines in the previous plot. This type of plot basically displays the mean sentiment of a nutrient over the years to give an overall idea of how the sentiment for a nutrient has been all these years. As can be seen here, the mean fat sentiment dipped in 1990, remained more or less consistent till 2005, but has started increasing ever since 2010.
Oh, yeah.
In the interest of time, I won't be able to go through all the examples of many other visualizations which I have here, but I have included them in the slide deck so that those interested can have a look at them later. Let me come to a couple of open questions. Majority of the nutrient-relevant statements are not positive or negative in nature in a direct way within the dietary guidelines. Most of the statements are not in a form like cholesterol is bad for health, or for example, vitamins are really good for health, but they are like A, B, C, and XYZ contain vitamins, or C, D, E, and XYZ fulfill your daily quota of proteins. The polarity scores for the overall statements might be affected by the positive and negative words, which are not necessarily directly about the nutrient in question. There might be a better way to handle this. Various sentiment is a package that is well tuned to social media data, as mentioned before. Text block, again, is for generic data. Even though the language used in the USDA dietary guidelines is more or less generic in nature, it might be a good idea to use these packages with pre-decided scores for words, where the lexicon, where a separate lexicon is created only for dietary-related data or nutrition-related data. That also might be a good idea. The final open question I feel is, are the official dietary guidelines by USDA the best and or the only trusted source to determine the trends in the sentiment for the nutrients over the years? what other articles or papers could be used? Finally, coming to the conclusion and the future scope, I learned many good things while working on this project. Python has many good quality packages for sentiment analysis. I ended up using TextBlob and Vader, but there are many other packages for sentiment analysis in Python, like the old school natural language toolkit, a package called GenSim, a package by Stanford called Stanford Core NLP, and another package called Spacey. Currently, the user has a choice to use TextBlob or Vader as the project currently stands. I did not come across a package specifically tuned to nutrition data. The same analysis can be tried by using or creating a package especially for nutrition data, and that might give us different and possibly more accurate results. As far as the future scope goes, it would be very interesting to analyze that once the official guidelines are released, how is the reaction of people on social media platforms like Twitter, or maybe on individual blogs and news articles. It would be interesting to note that does the sentiment for a particular nutrient change after the official guidelines are released. And in fact, the same technologies and packages I've used in this project can be used to analyze the data on social media as well. It would also be very interesting to analyze that how does the strength of language used for the nutrients in the dietary guidelines affect the consumption behavior of the consumers for the different nutrients. Well, that's all I have for you. At the end, I want to mention that the dataset for this for the completed project will be available soon on the Ag Data Commons website on the link shared below. It will have the code files, the original data I worked with, and also the descriptions of the method used. Akshat Pant will go in next and present his work. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Akshat Pant, a graduate student at the University of Maryland, College Park. I'm passionate about working with data and creating visualizations to gather insights. This project for gap assessment of accessible agrobiodiversity data using GBIF and the NAL Thesaurus was overseen by my supervisor at NAL, Cynthia Parr, and my supervisor at UMD, Adam Grisberg. So what is GBIF? GBIF stands for Global Biodiversity Information Facility and is an international network and research infrastructure funded by the world's governments and aimed at providing anyone, anywhere, open access to data about all life types on Earth. It provides data holding institutions around the world with common standards and open source tools that enable them to share information about where and when species have been recorded. This knowledge derives from many sources, including everything from museum specimens collected in the 18th and 19th century to geotagged smartphone photos shared by amateur naturalists in recent days and weeks. The data are provided by many institutions from around the world, and the data available through the GBIF portal are primarily distribution data on plants, animals, fungi, and microbes for the world, and scientific names for data. It also includes some limited agricultural data such as germplasm records. So this slide shows data about a specific organism, namely Zea mays, which is corn. So it has over 100,000 georeference specimens all over the world, as can be seen on the map. And GBIF also provides metrics on their overall GBIF corpus. So here we can see occurrence trends of kingdoms like Plantae, Animalia, and other kingdoms. So we can see that the trend increases with time. So the NAL Thesaurus and Glossary are online vocabulary tools of agricultural terms in English and Spanish, and are cooperatively produced by the National Agricultural Library, USDA, and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, as well as other Latin American agricultural institutions belonging to the Agricultural Information and Documentation Service of the Americas. The Thesaurus was first released by the NAL in 2002, and in 2007, NAL and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture collaborated to develop the Spanish version of the Thesaurus. It has in-depth coverage of agriculture, biology, and related disciplines, and also contains over over 135,000 terms. Each term has data like taxonomic rank, a broader term, that is its parent, a narrower term, its children, an RDF format, and a persistent URI that links to the organism's web page. So over 50,000 of the 135,000 terms in the thesaurus are organism names. So the first criteria to include a name in the thesaurus is the number of hits in Agricola. Agricola contains bibliographic records from the National Agricultural Library and provides millions of citations relating to the field of agriculture. Citations are comprised of journal articles, book chapters, theses, patents, softwares, audiovisual materials, and technical reports to support agricultural research. Sometimes entire groups are included if some members of the group have high numbers of hits in Agricola. There could be many reasons to stop wrongly indexed terms, and many times epithets are spelled the same as genus. In that case, all the narrower terms are added. Sometimes there are not that many hits, but the taxon may be medicinally or economically important, so those are added as well. Also, we focus on approximately 20 to 22,000 species level names to keep the analysis manageable, and also because anything above that, any analysis above that level would be too broad. So the goals outlined for this project were to get some descriptive statistics about the agrobiodiversity data in GBIF. So some statistics that can represent the whole data in just a few numbers. Visually see the occurrence trends of GBIF corpus and ag data in GBIF, and to determine any gaps or biases. Provide examples of and code for how agricultural researchers can work with the GBIF data. So the questions that need to be answered in order to achieve these goals outlined were, how many different species in the thesaurus have occurrences in GBIF? So what % of the species in the thesaurus have occurrence records in GBIF? Which are the most and the least common agricultural species in GBIF? And are there any particular species which have high occurrence records or low occurrence records? What is the temporal trend of the occurrences in the overall GBIF corpus? And how does this look like visually? And is there a way to compare this, and how can we compare this to the temporal trend of agriculturally relevant occurrence data? Also, how does the geographic distribution of the overall GBIF corpus looks like as compared to the geographic distribution of agriculturally relevant occurrences? In this talk, I'll only focus on the questions in bold because this project is still ongoing and I'm working on the other questions. So for this project, I used Python for data analysis because it is great and has support for both web scraping and data analysis, both of which were essential for this project. Jupyter notebooks were used, run through Anaconda. Project Jupyter is a non-profit open source project born out of the IPython project in 2014 as it evolved to support interactive data science and scientific computing across all programming languages. So you can use Jupyter notebook to run not only Python but R as well. And it will run directly on your browser without the need for internet access or any IDE. The Tableau has been used to create visualizations after performing the analysis in Python, and the main packages that were used in this project are pandas for data manipulation, the requests and JSON libraries to interact with the GBIF API, and NumPy, which adds support for array and matrix operations. So for each organism, the GBIF API was used to determine its rank, whether it's the species or not, and the count of its occurrences. So it turns out that 94% of all the species in NALT in the thesaurus have occurrence records in GBIF, and 6% have no occurrence records. Also, each species has 18,855 occurrence records on average. So this is a Venn diagram depicting the same. And so the most common, it turns out that the eBirds citizen science project is so successful that most of the occurrence records are bird sightings. And we can see that the least common occurrence records are those of insects and microbes. Also, just doing a simple binning of the count values tells us that the occurrence counts in the range 1 to 1000 are the most, followed by 1001 to 2000, and there are around 14,000 species with fewer than 1,000 occurrences. This graph shows us how the occurrence data in the overall GBIF corpus changes over time. The horizontal axis depicts years, and the vertical axis depicts the total number of occurrences for each year. The vertical axis is on a logarithmic scale. So this means that the trend increases not linearly but exponentially. So the scale has been changed to a log scale to view the changes in occurrence values a little better. So because of the high difference between the occurrence records during the earlier years and the 21st century, these changes would not be so apparent on the normal scale. GBIF already has some similar visualizations. And so there are some challenges that remain for the remainder of this project. Since most of the occurrence records are for birds, I need to adjust the GBIF bias in the bird citizen science. And the map on this slide shows the distribution of occurrences in the GBIF corpus. So to create a geographic distribution and for the corpus and the ag-relevant data, I need to improve the query so that results have effective latitude and longitude values, so there are no null or missing values in the analysis. Also, to compare the distributions, I need to decide on a good way to either show the geospatial differences or visualize the ag data in a manner similar to the GBIF corpus that is on the slide. So further analysis will be computationally expensive, and so I plan to take advantage of the Agriculture Research Services high-performance computing platform called Saith. This is a high-performance computing infrastructure for ARS researchers, and it is designed to enable large-scale computing and large-scale storage. So in conclusion, we observe that most of the species in NAL Thesaurus have occurrence data in GBIF, 94% to be accurate, and occurrence records for the GBIF corpus have increased exponentially with time. Turns out Python is a versatile language that is suitable for both web scraping and data analysis. And for future work, this approach will be useful in answering the remaining questions and will provide some guidance for people interested in using GBIF for agricultural analysis. It will also highlight where data is missing from GBIF, and gaps will be filled by indexing data from agricultural records or by accounting for biases. Future work can include below species occurrence like particular cultivars or varieties. Thank you, and we are open to questions.
All right. Before we open up for questions, this is Cindy Parr, and I've been helping to advise these students, and I want to thank them for our work with us this year. As was mentioned, Shivam and Akshat are students in the Masters of Information Management program in the iSchool at the University of Maryland. They presented about the projects that they've worked on this year while they were serving as fellows here at the National Ag Library. Keep in mind that these students are not domain experts themselves, but did consult with domain experts as they did their work. One of our goals for these projects was to develop capacity here at the library to support these kinds of analyses. And we hope to have more data science fellows working with us or working with you in the future. So we'd like to open up for questions now, and please feel free to ask either Shivam or Akshat about their work or to discuss data science at USDA in general. Remember, you can ask your questions in the chat window, and we'll also unmute everyone so that you can ask directly if you wish. Any questions?
Hi, this is Matthew Lang.
Hi, Matthew.
Go ahead, Matthew.
I had a question. I was looking at those slides and I saw, I believe it was Akshat's presentation, but I'm sorry, I don't remember. But one of the slides was terminologies going back to the 1600s.
Yes.
I see that right, and I'm curious where you collected that data from.
Yeah, so
and
I downloaded the data from the GBIF APIs. So you can run a query on GBIF to get occurrence records starting from a particular year.
So these are not terminologies, Matthew. These are occurrence records. So when Linnaeus gathered specimens for his work, those ended up in museums, and the metadata about those specimens ends up in GBIF.
Yeah, so these are like all the occurrence records for a particular year.
Okay, so I understand that. Okay, so do we have an explanation for the spikes?
So the spikes may represent the decades. So if data is not recorded properly, they may adjust it at the end of a decade. That's why we may be seeing the spikes.
Okay.
But there is another possible explanation, which is that there's major expeditions historically where, for example, Lewis and Clark would go out and collect a couple of thousand specimens, and then they would all appear in the same year. And so in that age of exploration, you're going to see more spikes.
I see. That's fascinating. It would be interesting to correlate that with expeditions and stuff. That would, from a historical perspective, I think that would be pretty cool. Nice work.
Thank you.
So while we wait for more questions, let me just follow on a little bit. So one of the goals of Akshat's study is to get a sense of what the ag biodata landscape is like. We suspect that there's a lot of agriculturally relevant data that has not been indexed by GBIF, and to the extent that that might also represent huge chunks of activity, it might also generate spikes like we've seen for the more historical museum-related data. So the point is that GBIF so far has really only looked to museums and citizen science and perhaps some limited agricultural sources for its data, but there's probably a lot more out there. Any other questions?
Is there any move towards integrating the GBIF data with into sort of logical, if you will, units of business, so that we can see how specific mentions in GBIF terms are being affected by various other aspects related to ag or climate change or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, we could do that. Can you hear me? Hello?
Repeat it. Go ahead.
We could do that. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
As far as I know, that hasn't happened, but it's an interesting direction to explore.
Cool.
The other thing is that we noticed that some of the more recent citizen science reports do include people who have, for example, uploaded photos of corn, perhaps from cornfields. So it may be that a rise in citizen science relating to agricultural activity might increase the representation of those organisms in GBIF. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, we may remain on the line a little bit if people are still trying to formulate their ideas. But Erin, do you want to discuss what happens next?
What happens next is we'll email the slide deck to everyone who attended, and we'll be posting on our social site. Eventually, we'll be making this publicly. We will have the recording as well. Commons news item on the Ag Data Commons if you want to join the recording. And you can always email us at the last email on the screen right now, nal-adc-curator@ars.usda.gov, if you have any further questions for us. And Shivam and Akshat's emails are here as well. Oh, we have another question. We're not going just yet.
No, I think.
Besides the data in the main textbook paper, is any data contained in online supplement tables? That's
Someone's asking everyone they can.
Yeah. So thank you for the question, David. I just saw your question. I ended up using only the official dietary guidelines, the official papers by USDA. And as I pointed out in my future scope, and you gave a good idea that we can actually go ahead, as a future scope of this project, we can go ahead and use the other supplement articles as well as, what people are talking about. I mean, not just the official USDA articles, but what is the perception in general about these nutrients. So that is one of the future scopes for this project, if that helps answer your question. I guess it did.
All right. If there are no further questions, we'll hang around for 5 minutes or so just in case anyone else has anything. Otherwise, we'll see you next month for our next webinar. Thank you.
Hi, I think, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Did someone else have another question?